This video features a lot of beautiful summery canal scenery, which is why I wanted to load it at the front end with 30 seconds of rain and misery and just a more realistic view of what boat life is actually like. So this video is probably titled something like Who Could Live on a Boat or Who Should Live on a Boat? And it would be a ludicrous idea for me to sit here and declare who is and isn't allowed to be on a boat, but hopefully this is far more useful than that, and this is in response to a lot of the questions and comments I've had over the years where people have asked if maybe their limited mobility or retiring and being in their, let's say, less youthful years on a canal boat, or even the first person who ever got in touch with me for proper boat life advice, who then ended up buying and living on a boat themselves in my local area, was a single lady who was concerned with the potential safety elements of being a solo female boater out in, let's be fair, some pretty isolated and obscure places. And just on that topic, before we double back to it later in this video, I would say it shouldn't matter whether you're a solo female or male boater, but unfortunately we know society's horrible, so you can decide yourself how much weight you want to put into that. But I'll deal with it more as a broad solo boater safety and security concern topic later on. So if we start by talking about the potential limited mobility, whether that's through disability or through being in your later years and potentially not as athletic as you once were, that's something that may be a surprising influence and a surprisingly big factor to some people when it comes to boat life. Because, believe it or not, when you see these lovely clips on screen of me gently cruising down the canals, it can actually be quite hard work. And I'm not talking about spending long, lazy days on the tiller following the sweeping curves of a lovely canal through the countryside. I'm talking about things like this now, the various features along the way. So here you can see I've stopped at one of the lift bridges out on the very rural Wixel area. But here we've got a really brilliantly functional lift bridge. Look at this, I'm holding a camera in one hand, I'm able to lift that entire bridge with a single hand winding the crank there. So you can't ask for much more than that, that's perfect. Unfortunately, not every lift bridge is that easy, and when it comes to the locks, it's unbelievable how stubborn some of the lock paddles are to raise and lower. And I know some people who simply have not been physically able to lift some of the paddles, and they've had to rely on other boaters or passers-by to come and find them stuck at a lock to give them that extra bit of elbow grease to get them through. And as I say, I'm not trying to make out that it's some sort of endurance task, but throughout the course of a year, with the locks being metal and wood, and even the walls of the locks can swell and get narrower or wider depending on the water in the ground, you can imagine you could come back to the same lock 6 months later and find it's significantly harder to get through than it was the first time you were there. So definitely something to consider depending on your level of fitness and ability. Even simpler than actually cruising out and about on the canals, it's important to consider the suitability of the boats themselves. These are small vessels, these are by name narrow boats, and as such there are canal-based charities such as the Linnell Trust that specialise in helping disabled people get out and enjoy the canals, and they have specially adapted boats with, I don't know, I'm not going to try and say what they've got, but they have specially adapted boats that can help people in wheelchairs on and off the boats and so on. And when I see the sort of adaptations that they've had to make, it starts to really bring things that I myself would never think about as limitations and difficulties. It really highlights them and how much work they've had to do to make it possible to put on these amazing services for people. So that's, again, something else that a lot of people might not think about, but of course, depending on what your situation is, it might be all that you think about before even considering being on a boat. And similarly, it's worth finding out what the towpaths in the area that you might be spending a lot of time on the canal are like, because luckily on a touristy canal like this on the Llangollen, there's lots of really well built and nice flat smooth towpaths around. It's not all like that, believe me, and even some of the really nice flat stuff is allowed to really overgrow in the summer months to a ludicrous level where even taking a bike I wouldn't fancy cycling through it, never mind a wheelchair or anything bigger or more significant and directly useful and necessary than a bike. So yeah, just a few things to consider there. Now, I don't want to be all negative, but this is sort of what the video's about, of saying, yes, it looks good, yes, it's lovely being in these beautiful sunny conditions, but this is the reality, and this is something that you might want to think about before you go wild and spend your life savings on a canal boat. So when it comes to being a single boater, a solo boater, however you want to word it, like I say, I'm just going to talk more broadly, and we're not going to put a gender to this, but I have a few things that I do. Firstly, people always knew roughly where I was on my boat. So if I didn't appear when I should have appeared, if I'm in a low signal, difficult to phone, hard to reach area, then people would know where to go looking for me. Also, in the age of having tracking apps on your phone and so on, especially, I mean, look at this. This is me in my mid to late 20s, kayaking, getting on and off the boat. I'm paddling sometimes a mile plus away from the boat. I haven't even got shoes on. So knowing that I've got a phone with a tracking app on it, so that if something stupid did happen or unfortunate did happen, somebody knows where I am or is able to find that information, hopefully. It gives me peace of mind, and I know it certainly gives my family peace of mind. Similarly, my personal possessions have tracking apps, and when I was selling my last boat and when I am going to be getting my next boat, I'll keep an Apple AirTag on it so that I can literally just look on my phone if I'm away from the boat for a few days, and I can see where it was last sort of pinged as its location. And if it's moved, I know that there might be something fishy going on, and to either get there myself and find out, or get somebody who might be bigger and tougher and stronger than me to go and check everything's okay. But this is something that concerns me more these days, because I feel that there's a lot more mischief in the world, and I've had incidents with my boats in the past, but very few over the space of what's literally over a decade. So I can't say it's anything but rare, but I feel as if it's less rare than it used to be to have general trouble out and about, we'll say. And next year, given that there's a good chance I'll have my third boat, and it'll be the first time I've bought a boat and also had a girlfriend at the same time, I know there's potentially days where she may be out on the boat on her own without me for these extended periods, which of course gives me a lot more to think about than when I was just a stupid idiot lad myself, going wild, having the time of my life in my mid to late 20s on a boat. That, given that she recently fainted and has fractured her eye socket on the way down, there's a lot more things like that that you've got to be sensible about and make sure there's ways to communicate, ways that people know, oh, is everything okay? I haven't heard from him since whenever. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to consider. There's some people who I just feel unfortunately won't find that boat life is suitable for them. And there's some people who I think would be pleasantly surprised that boat life is a lot more suitable for them than they anticipated. Anyway, just a few thoughts there. See ya!